What are some of the darker effects COVID-19 has had that we don't talk about? My brother who works for DSS said during the pandemic child abuse reports plummeted. Which likely means unfortunately that rather than there being less abuse, there are less chances for people like teachers having a chance to catch and report the signs. Well, everyone else has mentioned mental health, but what I think is worth pointing out how COVID massively accentuated political and social divisions within Western countries. The work environment has been rather toxic. I work in a company where some people have the option to stay home while others don't, and it has caused some resentment between departments. I see that resentment some too. People who had to come in were resentful that some got to work remote. Now they're making everyone come in some, and those who could work remote are resentful. Honestly, I was the opposite of resentment. I work it, and when the pandemic started and everyone was at home while I still had to come in, it was bliss. No one there to bother me, no pleasantries, and all forms of dress code went out the window. I could also park right up front instead of taking whatever was left. I was hoping the company would stay like that. Don't forget the best part. No one walking up to your desk to angrily complain about something that's their own fault. How much hearing impaired people were affected? My mother, who wears hearing aids, also depends on reading lips, especially in louder, busier areas. Hearing aids can have trouble sorting through complex noise situations. You can imagine what happened when everyone covered their mouths. Now she's more isolated than ever. Since then, I've ran into a coworker who is also hearing impaired but doesn't want to return to office because while she can read lips on Zoom, she won't be able to if we mask up in person. They were an invisible casualty of this pandemic. The response to this has been more than I expected. If anyone has links to their favorite organizations to donate to help the hard of hearing, please share them. I hope the stories below help us all be a little more empathetic to each other. Thanks. I didn't realize how much I was relying on watching someone's mouth to hear properly. Now I have to lean without getting my face in someone's face when I have conversations at normal speaking volume or when there's any outside noises. A skyrocket in domestic abuse as families are forced inside with one another, coupled with financial issues, or just people being stuck with abusive partners with nowhere to go. Also, increased alcohol consumption. My older brother drank so much that he went from pre-cirrhosis to dead in a year. COVID really ruined his life. More division between families because of opinions, beliefs on how to deal with COVID. Yep, this is me. I lost my dad to COVID this year, followed by my aunt. Now I've lost my family on his side over it. They don't believe it was COVID and go to extraordinary lengths to deny it. And I won. He died gasping for breath in my stepmom and sister's arms the night I begged them to take him in. Holy duck, that's horrible. I'm sorry. People who were furloughed had time to realize they hate their job. I could only speak in service industry, but it feels like a soul-crushing job more than ever. I used to love bartending, and now I feel trapped by it. Everyone I talk to seems to feel the same. The money doesn't seem worth it anymore. Guests are worse and more entitled than ever, and staff shortages have made shifts harder and longer. It has left me with a sense of hopelessness, as it's the only career I've known, but I cannot imagine a future continuing to do it. The staff shortage at my job has made me want to quit more than ever. I used to get regular breaks with multiple coworkers in my department, and now I'm lucky if it's me and one other person. I know quitting would make it even worse for those coworkers I would leave, but if it isn't tempting. I'm not getting paid enough and everything is more expensive since COVID. Edit for clarity, I don't work at office job which some people have assumed. I am also still working on my degree, which makes it even more difficult to try and find a new job that works with my class schedule and that'll get enough hours in. I'm not wanting to go to retail either, so my options as an undergrad are pretty limited. Also, as for expenses, rent, groceries, and gasoline are much more expensive since COVID started. All I have gotten is a 65 raise per hour. It would pain y'all to know how much I make per hour. This is gonna be an app history question in 20 years. Briefly explain the political, economic, and social ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic. Short answer, choose only two. Are you allowed to say absolute ducking shit show on an app exam? Ada, I'm way too old to be taking these myself anymore, but thanks for all the insights. I just sorta shrugged and moved on when I was a kid, but it's interesting to know more about how the proverbial sausage gets made. Should be worth double point bonus for accuracy. 911 dispatcher for a small town here. The amount of domestic violence calls I have taken has skyrocketed. It's beginning to seriously drag me down and exhaust me. I also help the local programs try to get food to families with kids. I broke down when I realized some kids only get food at school. I work as a school bus driver, and it has been an interesting experience thus far. The pandemic closed things down in March, and lasted into summer, when a lot of kids would usually have summer school. I had been out of work since March when schools had closed their doors, and was eager for some kind of work to do. Over the summer, many drivers including myself would come to work, get our bus ready, head to a school and pick up numerous coolers full of school-grade lunches, and head into various neighborhoods, church parking lots, and apartment complexes to hand out these lunch kits to kids who were not able to get their meals from school because of the pandemic. It pained me more than I had ever felt being a school bus driver when many of these kids would come up to the bus alone, and thank me for bringing them the one meal they would have for the day, before walking back home and often sharing what they had with siblings who were too young to come out. I gave out extras to the kids I knew were taking care of others, and thankfully we never had a day where we ran out of lunches to give to them. But I will never forget the hardships I observed of these kids and how much extra perspective the pandemic gave me into their day-to-day lives. Parts are harder to come by, and everything is more expensive. I know everyone is commenting about PC parts, but parts of everything are hard to come by. I work in supply chain and we are constantly battling shortages of electronic parts, plastic parts, metal, etc. Yep, and there's going to be knock-on effects from this for years to come. Those parts are hard to come by because they weren't being produced in sufficient numbers for perhaps a whole year or more. Since the manufacturers weren't manufacturing, a huge number of them went out of business permanently. Every downstream supply chain that relies on any product that isn't being produced is royally screwed, which could cause them to go out of business, and then the companies they supply to, and so on and so forth, until all the dominoes are down. And now instead of 93% of everything we touch ultimately being owned by 10 conglomerates, it will be 95%. Rinse and repeat every 5 to 10 years, and it's how we went from hundreds of independent companies making our stuff, it's now a dozen. During a recession or pandemic usually everyone gets hurt, but the last 20 years only the middle and lower classes get hurt, the upper classes actually continue to make money. First off, you are a beautiful muskox. But I've been seeing the same thing in my industry. Anyone with enough capital to make it through 2020 is now in a great position to buy up the smaller organizations. And most of those small organizations are still reeling, so a chance to sell now is much more appealing than it was 2 to 3 years ago. Suppliers who used to be great to work with are buried in red tape and tedious procedures as a result of trying to integrate with their new owners. The pandemic is making the rich richer, and it's been hard to watch it unfold in real time. 30% increase in drug overdose deaths in 2020. For me, it's been far too easy to isolate. I literally do not have to go outside of my house except to take out trash. Everything is deliverable. A local laundromat even started cashing in on the craze briefly by picking up dirty laundry at customers' homes and delivering it clean. My depression and social anxiety have absolutely flourished. So I'm back in the office, but it was scary to see how quickly I acclimated to essentially being a hermit. If you can, at least try to get out for walks periodically. I found it helped some. This is a bit embarrassing because I'm in my 20s, but lockdown made me develop hemorrhoids. It's common among PPL who sit a lot for their work, and because of lockdown I get less exercise, and here I am with fucking hemorrhoids on top of all the stress and chaos of the pandemic. Edit, rip my inbox. I cannot recommend Metamucil enough. You are never too young to get enough fiber. A lot of people get hemorrhoids when they are at any age because of medication. Also, pregnancy causes them. Don't be too embarrassed, as you are not alone. People just don't talk about them. Less cancer and other serious diseases diagnosed and treated, less needed surgeries performed because of the hospital staff being reassigned to COVID wards. Less referrals written to not overwhelm specialists. In-person health services becoming harder to reach, so less conditions like skin cancer diagnosed. The health of all of us suffers, not only those affected by COVID. This is so true. My brother had cancer and started chemotherapy. He doesn't drive and lives in a small town. I went and drove him the 35 miles to his treatments. I had to wait in my Jeep for 5 hours or so in the middle of winter in Minnesota because everything was locked down. It was hard to get things like tests done. It was way harder for him than when I had the same cancer and treatment regimen 25 years earlier. Him.